The bruises were hidden under her makeup. At least that's what Jenna Caldwell told herself as she carried a tray of drinks through Romano's Italian restaurant on a Tuesday evening in late September. She'd spent 40 minutes that afternoon applying foundation thick enough to cover the purple-blue marks on her left cheekbone and the split at the corner of her lip that was just starting to heal. From a distance, in the dim lighting of the restaurant, she looked fine, professional, put together, just another waitress working the dinner shift. Up close, if someone looked carefully, really looked, they might notice that the makeup was slightly too thick, that her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, that she moved with the careful deliberateness of someone whose ribs hurt when she breathed too deeply. Jenna was 28 years old. She'd been hiding bruises for 2 years. It had started small, the way these things always do. A shove during an argument, an arm grabbed too tightly. Apologies that seemed genuine at the time, promises that it would never happen again. By the time Jenna understood what was happening, she was living with a man who controlled her phone, her bank account, her schedule, and her body. A man who told her constantly that she was worthless, that no one else would ever want her, that if she tried to leave, he would find her and make her sorry. His name was Derek Vaughn. He was 34 years old, worked in sales at a pharmaceutical company, and to everyone who knew them casually, he seemed charming, successful, perfectly normal. Behind closed doors, he was a nightmare. 3 weeks ago, Jenna had done something she'd been planning in secret for 6 months. She'd saved money from tips that Derek didn't know about. She'd contacted a women's shelter, she'd packed a single bag with essentials and left while Derek was at work. She'd moved into a studio apartment in a different neighborhood, Chelsea instead of Murray Hill, far enough that she felt like she could breathe. She'd filed for a restraining order. She'd changed her phone number. She'd gotten this job at Romano's because it was cash tips and they didn't ask too many questions and she could start immediately. For 3 weeks, she'd been free, scared, constantly looking over her shoulder, but free. Then tonight, Derek had found her. She'd seen him the moment he walked past the restaurant's front window. That familiar silhouette, that particular way he moved. Confident, entitled, like the world owed him whatever he wanted. Jenna had frozen mid-step, nearly dropping the tray she was carrying. He hadn't come inside. Not yet. He'd just walked past slowly, looked through the window, directly at her, and smiled. That smile that said, "I know where you are now." Then he'd kept walking. Jenna had spent the last hour working her tables on autopilot, trying not to panic, trying to figure out what to do. The restraining order said Derek couldn't come within 500 feet. Reached for her phone. She heard Derek's reached for her phone. She heard Derek's voice in her head. "They won't do anything until I actually hurt you again. And by then it'll be too late." Now it was 8:47 p.m. The dinner rush was winding down. Jenna was working the back section of the restaurant. 6 tables, currently 4 occupied. Table 7 had been there since 7:30. 4 men, all in expensive suits, speaking Italian in low voices. They'd ordered well. Appetizers, entrees, wine that cost more than Jenna's weekly rent. The kind of customers who tipped generously if you were attentive without being intrusive. The man sitting at the head of the table was maybe 45, with dark hair going silver at the temples and the kind of face that suggested he didn't smile often. He wore his authority quietly. The other 3 men clearly deferred to him, but he didn't demand it. It just was. Jenna had served their table 3 times. Each time, she'd felt his eyes on her. Not in the way men usually looked at waitresses. Not evaluating, not predatory. Something else. Observant. Like he was noticing things. She was refilling their water glasses when it happened. The front door opened. Derek walked in. Jenna's hand started shaking so badly that water sloshed over the rim of the glass she was holding. She set the pitcher down quickly before she dropped it. Derek stood in the entryway, scanning the restaurant. His eyes found her. That smile again, the one that looked friendly to anyone who didn't know him, the one that Jenna knew meant violence. He started walking toward her section. "Excuse me," Jenna said to table 7, her voice barely steady. "I'll be right back with your check." She turned toward the kitchen, walking quickly, trying not to run. Her heart was pounding so hard she felt dizzy. Behind her, she heard Derek's voice. "Jenna! Hey, Jenna, don't walk away from me." She kept walking. "Jenna!" Louder now. Other customers were starting to look. "I just want to talk. Stop being dramatic." Jenna reached the kitchen door. Her manager, Tony, looked up from where he was checking orders. "You okay?" "My ex is here," Jenna said, voice shaking. "I have a restraining order. He's not supposed to—" "I'll handle it." Tony started toward the dining room, but Derek was faster. He'd followed Jenna to the kitchen door. He grabbed her arm, not hard enough to leave a mark visible to witnesses, but hard enough that Jenna gasped. We need to talk, Derek said. His voice was calm, reasonable. To anyone watching, it might have looked like a boyfriend trying to reconcile with his girlfriend. You can't just disappear and file fake accusations. That's not how this works. Let go of me! Jenna tried to pull away. His grip tightened. You're making a scene, Derek said, still using that calm voice. Let's go. Outside and talk like adults. I said let go. Or what? You'll call the cops? Tell them what? That your boyfriend came to see you at work? His eyes were cold now. You know what happens to people who file false restraining orders, Jenna? You know what happens to... She asked you to let go. The voice came from behind Derek. Deep, calm, carrying an edge that made something in the restaurant's atmosphere shift. Derek turned. The man from table 7 stood there, the one with silver temples and the quiet authority. Up close, he was taller than Jenna had realized. He wore his expensive suit like armor, and something about his posture suggested that he was very used to being obeyed. This is a private conversation, Derek said, trying to sound authoritative. Trying and failing, his voice had gone slightly uncertain. No, it's not. The man's eyes flicked to Derek's hand on Jenna's arm. It's assault. Let her go. Who the hell are you? Someone who doesn't like men, who hurt women. The man's voice stayed calm, but something underneath it had gone very cold. Let her go. Derek hesitated. He was used to being the most threatening person in any room, but something about this man, the way he stood, the way the other 3 men from table 7 had silently moved to positions around them, the way even Tony the manager had taken a step back, suggested that Derek was suddenly outmatched. Derek released Jenna's arm. This isn't over, he said to her. Yes, it is. The man from table 7 stepped between them. You're leaving, now. You can't. I can, and I am. The man looked at Derek with eyes that had seen violence and been unmoved by it. You have 2 choices. Walk out now with your dignity, or be carried out without it. Choose quickly. Derek looked at the 4 men surrounding him. He looked at Jenna, who had backed up against the wall, clutching her arm where he'd grabbed it. I'll see you around, Jenna, Derek said. A threat, barely disguised. No, the man said quietly. You won't. Derek left. But Jenna knew, the way you know things when you've lived with violence, that this wasn't over. What would you have done? Would you have intervened, or would you have stayed out of what looked like a private matter? Jenna stood against the kitchen wall, shaking. Around her, the restaurant slowly returned to normal. Customers went back to their meals. Tony muttered something about calling the police. The 4 men from table 7 returned to their table, except the one with silver temples. He stayed. Are you hurt? He asked. Not demanding, just asking. Jenna shook her head. Then, more honestly, not from just now. Something crossed his face. Recognition, maybe, or anger carefully controlled. But from before. It wasn't a question. Jenna didn't answer. How long has he been doing this? The man asked. I shouldn't talk about this with a customer. I'm not asking as a customer. He looked at her with those observant eyes that had been noticing things all evening. I'm asking as someone who just watched a man violate a restraining order and threaten you in front of witnesses. How did you know about the restraining order? Because men like him don't stop unless forced to. And you moved, changed your number, and looked terrified when he walked in. That's not an ex-boyfriend situation. That's a protection order situation. Jenna felt tears burning behind her eyes. She was too tired to keep lying. 2 years? He's been hurting me for 2 years. I left 3 weeks ago, got the restraining order. I thought I was safe. You filed a police report. Yes, but he's good at this. He never leaves marks anywhere visible. He's charming to everyone else, and he works at a pharmaceutical company. Everyone thinks he's this successful, normal guy. The man was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to Jenna. My name is Marco. Santoro. If your ex comes near you again, at work, at home, anywhere, you call the number on that card, day or night. Someone will answer. Jenna looked at the card. It was simple, just a name and a phone number. No company, no title, no identifying information. Who are you? She asked. Someone who can make sure Derek Vaughn doesn't hurt you again. Marco Santoro's voice was calm, factual. Someone who has resources the police don't have. I can't afford. I'm not asking for money, he said it simply. I'm offering help. Why? Marco was quiet for a long moment. Because I had a sister once, and men like your ex are the reason I use the past tense. He looked at Jenna with eyes that had seen loss and been changed by it. No one helped her, so now when I can, I help. Before Jenna could respond, Tony appeared. Jenna, take a break. 15 minutes, back room. Sit down. After Marco Santoro returned to his table, Jenna went to the back room and sat on a stool, staring at the business card in her hand. She knew who Marco Santoro was. Not personally, but the way everyone in certain circles knew, through whispers, through news articles that used words like alleged and suspected, through the reputation that preceded him. Marco Santoro was the head of one of New York's most powerful, organized crime families. The Santoro family had controlled significant portions of the city's construction, waste management, and labor unions for 3 generations. Marco himself had taken over from his father 15 years ago. The articles about him were contradictory. Some painted him as a violent criminal. Others suggested he'd modernized the family's operations and moved away from the most brutal traditions. All agreed he was intelligent, ruthless when necessary, and commanded absolute loyalty from people who worked for him. And he'd just given Jenna his personal phone number. She should be terrified. She should throw away the card. She should have nothing to do with someone connected to organized crime. But when she thought about Derek's smile as he'd walked past the restaurant window, when she remembered the feel of his hand on her arm, when she imagined him coming back, and he would come back because men like Derek always did, she found that fear of Marco Santoro seemed distant compared to fear of Derek Vaughn. Jenna put the card in her pocket. For 4 days, nothing happened. Jenna worked her shifts at Romano's. She went home to her studio apartment and locked the door and checked the locks 3 times before she could sleep. She looked over her shoulder on every street corner. She didn't see Derek. She didn't hear from him. She didn't call the number on Marco Santoro's business card. On the 5th day, her manager Tony pulled her aside before her shift. Someone left something for you at the host stand. It was an envelope. Inside, a note written in neat handwriting. Security cameras have been installed. Around your apartment building. The footage is monitored. If Derek Vaughn comes near your home, we will know. You are not as alone as you think. MS. Jenna read the note twice. Then she walked outside on her break and looked around her apartment building, a run-down place in Chelsea with a landlord who barely maintained the property. There were new cameras, professional ones, positioned to cover every entrance. Someone had installed a security system on a building they didn't own without asking permission because a waitress they'd met once was being stalked by her violent ex. Jenna didn't know whether to be grateful or terrified. She chose grateful. Terrified could come later if needed. That night, Derek called her. She didn't know how he'd gotten her new number, but somehow he had. I miss you, he said when she answered. His voice was soft, sad, the voice he used when he wanted to manipulate her. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. Come home, Jenna, please. I have a restraining order, Jenna said, trying to keep her voice steady. You're not supposed to contact me. That's just a misunderstanding. You were upset. You filed paperwork you didn't mean. I forgive you for that. Just come home and we'll talk it through. No. Jenna! The voice changed, harder now. Don't make this difficult. You know I'll find you anywhere you go. You know how this ends. Why make it painful for both of us? Jenna hung up. Her hands were shaking. 2 hours later, her phone rang again. Unknown number. Hello? Jenna, this is Marco Santoro. Derek Vaughn called you tonight. I'm aware of the call. I'm calling to tell you that it's being handled. Do you have my phone tapped? I have your phone monitored for your protection. If you'd prefer I stop, I will. But I thought you should know that calls from Derek are being recorded and documented as violations of your restraining order. Jenna sat down on her bed. How did he get my new number? He paid someone at your cell phone company to give it to him. That person no longer works there, and your number has been changed again. The new one is more secure. I didn't ask you to do any of this. I know. But I told you I would help, and I meant it. Marco's voice was calm, matter of fact. Derek Vaughn is escalating. The phone call tonight included threats. That means he's planning something. I'm making sure that when he does, you're protected. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. Marco was quiet for a moment. My sister's name was Sophia. She was 23 when her boyfriend beat her to death in their apartment. She'd filed 3 police reports. She'd gotten a restraining order. She'd done everything right. None of it saved her. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just let me help you not be the next Sophia. After he hung up, Jenna sat in her apartment, the apartment that now had security cameras she hadn't asked for, with a phone number, Derek. somehow couldn't access anymore, and tried to process what was happening. A mafia boss was protecting her, not asking for anything in return, just protecting her. It should have felt wrong. It should have felt dangerous. Instead, it felt like the first time in 2 years that someone actually believed she was in danger and did something about it. 1 week after Marco Santoro had first intervened at the restaurant, Jenna arrived at work to find Tony looking nervous. "Someone's here to see you," Tony said. "Private dining room. He says it's important." Jenna's stomach dropped. "Is it Derek?" "No, you should just go. Room 3. The private dining room was small, 1 table, elegant decor, the kind of space Romano's reserved for business meetings that needed discretion. Marco Santoro sat at the table. He wasn't alone. 2 other men sat with him, both wearing suits, both with the bearing of people who'd seen violence and participated in it. "Jenna," Marco said, when she entered. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." Jenna sat, her heart pounding. "What's this about?" "Derek Vaughn was arrested this morning," Marco said simply. "The charges include violation of a restraining order, stalking, harassment, and conspiracy to commit assault." Jenna blinked. "What?" "He's been planning to hurt you. We documented his plans, collected evidence, and provided it to law enforcement. He was arrested at his office. He's currently being held on $500,000 bail." "How did you— What evidence?" One of the other men slid a folder across the table. Jenna opened it. Inside were photos, text messages, emails, a complete record of Derek's activities over the past week. Photos of Derek sitting in his car across the street from her apartment building, text messages to a friend discussing teaching Jenna a lesson, emails to someone Jenna didn't know, asking about where to find someone who could help with a problem. "How did you get all this?" "I have resources," Marco said. "And I told you I would handle it." Jenna looked at the evidence, then at Marco. "This is illegal. How you got this? It's not admissible in court." "Some of it is admissible. Some of it just convinced the police to look harder at Derek and find admissible evidence on their own." Marco's expression didn't change. "The photos of him violating the restraining order are perfectly legal. They're from the security cameras around your building, which your landlord agreed to let me install after I explained the situation." "And the texts and emails?" "Those came from sources the police found after receiving an anonymous tip about Derek's activities. Whether I provided the tip is immaterial to whether the evidence is admissible." Jenna understood what he wasn't quite saying. Marco had gathered illegal evidence, then used it to point police in the right direction so they could find legal evidence. "He's going to make bail," Jenna said quietly. $500,000 sounds like a lot, but Derek's family has money. They'll post it. And when he gets out— "He won't make bail," Marco interrupted gently. "His bail was set at $500,000 initially. Then during his arraignment, additional evidence was presented, suggesting he's a flight risk. The bail was revoked. He'll remain in custody until trial." "What additional evidence?" "Plane tickets to Brazil purchased 3 days ago, for a flight leaving tomorrow, and a bank account in the Cayman Islands that Derek apparently forgot to mention to his lawyer." Marco said this completely calmly, as if he hadn't just described evidence that had appeared very conveniently exactly when needed. "You planted evidence," Jenna said. "I presented evidence that already existed," Marco corrected. "Derek did buy those plane tickets. He does have that bank account. I simply made sure the prosecutor knew about them." Jenna looked at this man, this criminal, because that's what he was, regardless of how calmly he spoke, or how expensive his suit was, who had done more to protect her in 1 week than the legal system had managed in 3 months. "Why?" she asked again. "Why go this far for someone you don't even know?" Marco was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than usual. "Sophia called me the night she died. She told me her boyfriend was outside her apartment, that she was scared, that the police had said there was nothing they could do until he actually hurt her. I told her to lock the door and I'd be there in 20 minutes. He stopped, started again. I was 17 minutes away when I got the second call from her neighbor. Sophia was already dead by the time I arrived. Her boyfriend had broken down the door, and by the time neighbors called 911, it was too late." Marco looked at Jenna with eyes that had been carrying that for 20 years. "I've spent 2 decades building power and resources. Some of it through legal means, some through less legal means, but all of it with one purpose, so that when someone like Sophia calls, I can actually help, so that restraining orders aren't just pieces of paper, so that there's nothing we can do isn't the answer." "I'm not Sophia," Jenna said softly. "No, you're not, because this time I can help." Marco pushed the folder toward her. Derek will be in prison for a minimum of 2 years, possibly longer. You're safe. Jenna looked at the folder, at the evidence that would put Derek away, at the 3 men sitting across from her who'd accomplished in 1 week what the legal system had failed to do in months. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "People like you don't help for free." "People like me," Marco repeated, something almost like amusement crossing his face. "You mean criminals?" "I mean powerful men. Everyone wants something." "That's fair." Marco leaned back in his chair. "What I want is for you to rebuild your life. Get therapy if you need it. Find work you actually... If Derek contacts you from prison, if he threatens you, if anything happens, you have my number. Use it." As Jenna stood to leave, Marco added, "One more thing. There's an envelope at the host stand. Inside is $5,000. Consider it back pay for wages you lost because Derek controlled your finances. Use it however you want." "I can't accept..." "You can, and you will, because Sophia never got the chance to rebuild her life, and you do. Don't waste it." Jenna didn't waste it. Over the next 6 months, her life transformed in ways she'd stopped believing were possible. She used the $5,000 Marco had given her to move to a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. She found a therapist who specialized in domestic violence survivors. She started sleeping through the night for the first time in years. She also quit waitressing at Romano's, not because she'd been fired or because she wanted to hide, but because Marco had been right. She needed to find work she actually enjoyed, not just work that paid bills. Jenna had always loved art. In college, before Derek, she'd studied graphic design. She'd been good at it, but Derek had convinced her that art was a waste of time, that she needed to work real jobs, that her creative ambitions were childish. Now, free from Derek's voice in her head, Jenna remembered who she'd been before him. She took online courses in graphic design, updating skills that had gone dormant. She built a portfolio. She applied for positions at design firms. And one afternoon, in late March, she received a call from a company called Santoro Properties. "We're looking for a graphic designer to handle marketing materials for our real estate developments," the HR representative said. "Your portfolio came highly recommended. Would you be interested in interviewing?" Jenna knew immediately who'd recommended her. The interview was professional and thorough. The salary offer was generous, more than generous, actually, for an entry-level position. "I need to be honest with you," Jenna said to the hiring manager. "I know Marco Santoro. I think that's why I'm being offered this job. I don't want charity." The hiring manager, a woman in her 50s named Patricia, smiled slightly. "Mr. Santoro did mention you, but we looked at your portfolio before we looked at his recommendation. You're talented. We're not hiring you as a favor. We're hiring you because you're good." "And if I say no?" "Then we'll hire someone else, and Mr. Santoro will probably tell me I didn't try hard enough to recruit you." Patricia's smile widened. "But you'd be turning down a good opportunity for the wrong reasons. Take the job, Jenna. Prove you deserve it. Then it's not charity, it's just a door that opened at the right time." Jenna took the job. For 6 months, she worked at Santoro Properties, designing, marketing materials, learning the business, proving to herself and everyone around her that she'd been hired for her skills, not her connection to Marco. She saw Marco occasionally, usually at company events or when he stopped by the office. He was always professional, always appropriate. He asked how she was settling in, whether the work was challenging enough, whether she needed anything. He never asked for anything in return. He never mentioned Derek. He never made her feel like she owed him. But Jenna knew she did. Not in a transactional way. Marco clearly didn't see it that way. But in the way you owe someone who saved your life when they didn't have to, who stepped in when no one else would, who saw you drowning and threw you a rope. One evening in September, exactly 1 year after Derek had walked into Romano's restaurant and Marco had intervened, Jenna stayed late at the office working on a presentation. Marco appeared in her doorway around 8 p.m. "You're still here. Big presentation tomorrow. I wanted to get it right." "Can I see?" Jenna showed him the marketing materials she'd designed for Santoro Properties' newest development, a mixed-use building with residential units and street-level retail. The designs were clean, modern, and effective. Marco studied them carefully. "These are excellent. Much better than what our previous designer produced." "That's kind of you to say. It's accurate, not kind. There's a difference." He looked at her. "You've done well this year. Patricia says you're one of the best hires we've made. I'm glad I'm earning my salary." "You're earning significantly more than your salary. We're underpaying you, actually. I'm fixing that next quarter." Jenna smiled. "You don't have to do that." "I'm not doing it. Patricia is. She came to me 3 weeks ago and said if we didn't give you a raise, you'd get recruited by someone else. So we're giving you a raise before you start looking." "I'm not looking. I'm 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 not looking. No, but you could be. You're talented. You have options now. That's how it should be. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Can I ask you something? Jenna said. Personal. Go ahead. Do you ever think about Sophia? About what happened? Marco's expression changed, something painful crossing his face before his usual composure returned. Every day, usually multiple times a day. Does it get easier? No, it gets different. The sharp edges become dull. The constant pain becomes occasional ache, but it never really goes away. He looked at her directly. Why do you ask? Because I still have nightmares about Derek. Even though he's in prison, even though I'm safe now, I wake up and I'm back in that apartment with him, and I can't get away, and no one's coming to help. That's normal, Marco said quietly. Trauma doesn't disappear because the danger is gone. It takes time to convince your body that you're actually safe. How long did it take you to feel safe? Marco considered the question. I don't think I ever did. I just learned to be dangerous enough that feeling unsafe didn't matter anymore. That's a terrible answer. It's an honest one. Marco smiled slightly, a rare occurrence. But you're different. You're healing in ways I never did. That's good. That's what should happen. Because you helped me. Because you let me. And because you did the hard work of actually healing instead of just building walls. Jenna thought about that, about how Marco had saved her, but how she'd saved herself too, how both things were true at once. Thank you, she said, for everything. For seeing what was happening that night at the restaurant. For helping when you didn't have to. For giving me space to rebuild my life instead of making me feel like I owed you something. You don't owe me anything. I know. That's why I want to say thank you. Marco nodded. You're welcome. And Jenna, if you ever need anything, you still have my number, not as your employer, as someone who meant what he said about helping. 18 months after the night at Romano's restaurant, Derek Vaughn was released from prison. He'd served his full sentence, 2 years, because he'd been combative with guards and other inmates, accumulating disciplinary actions that prevented early release. Jenna found out through a victim notification system, an automated call informing her that Derek had been released and was required to stay at least 1,000 feet away from her at all times. The call came on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, Jenna had received a text from Marco. I'm aware. You're still protected. He won't come near you. Jenna didn't know how Marco knew about Derek's release, probably through the same monitoring systems he'd set up to protect her 18 months ago. But she believed him. For 1 week, nothing happened. Derek stayed away. Jenna went to work, went home, lived her life. On the 8th day after Derek's release, Jenna was leaving Santoro Properties' office building when she saw him. He was standing across the street, just standing there, watching. The restraining order said 1,000 feet. He was probably 1,200 feet away. Technically legal, but clearly intentional. He didn't approach. He didn't call out. He just stood there, making sure she knew he'd found her again. Jenna pulled out her phone and called the number she'd been carrying for 18 months. Marco. He's here, outside my building. He's not violating the restraining order technically, but he's standing where I can see him, making sure I know he's watching. I see him. Marco's voice was calm. There's a car pulling up beside you. Silver sedan. Get in. Jenna turned. A silver sedan had indeed pulled up to the curb. The driver, a man she recognized from Marco's security detail, opened the door. "Where are we going?" Jenna asked. "Somewhere Derek can't follow. Get in the car, Jenna." She got in. The car pulled away smoothly, leaving Derek standing on the sidewalk watching. They drove for 20 minutes, heading into a neighborhood Jenna didn't recognize. Industrial, quiet. The kind of place where businesses were warehouses and conversation was discouraged. The car stopped outside a building with no signage. Inside, Marco was waiting in what looked like an office. Functional furniture, clean but impersonal. Clearly not his primary workspace. "I'm sorry," Marco said when Jenna entered. "I didn't want to bring you here, but Derek has been outside your building for 3 days. We've been monitoring him. He's escalating again." 3 days? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted to see what he'd do, whether he'd approach or just watch, whether this was him being stupid or him planning something, and he's planning something. He's been talking to someone, we're not sure who yet, about finding a way to finish our conversation." Marco's expression was grim. "That's not the language of someone who's accepted that it's over. That's the language of someone planning revenge." Jenna sat down, suddenly exhausted. "So what do I do? Get another restraining order? Move again? Change my name and hide for the rest of my life?" "No, you let me handle it." Marco's voice was very quiet, very calm, and carried an undertone of something Jenna had only heard once before, the night at Romano's when he'd told Derek to leave or be carried out. "What does that mean?" "It means Derek Vaughn has violated his parole by stalking you. It means he's made threats that we have documented. And it means I'm going to make sure he understands that you are under my protection, and that touching you carries consequences he can't survive." "Marco." "I'm not going to kill him," Marco said, reading her expression. "I'm going to educate him about reality. Sometimes people need very clear, very direct lessons about what's acceptable and what isn't. Derek needs that lesson." "What kind of lesson?" "The kind where he understands that you are untouchable, that every time he thinks about approaching you, he'll remember what happened when he tried." Marco looked at her steadily. "I know this isn't how the legal system is supposed to work. I know you probably think I should let the police handle it. But Jenna, Sophia called the police multiple times. They told her there was nothing they could do until her boyfriend actually hurt her. By the time he hurt her, she was dead. I don't want you to hurt him." "I'm not going to hurt him. I'm going to educate him. There's a difference." Jenna wanted to argue. She wanted to say that violence wasn't the answer, that there had to be a legal solution, that Marco shouldn't risk himself for her. But she also knew Derek. She knew that legal solutions hadn't stopped him before. She knew that restraining orders were paper. She knew that the criminal justice system had given him 2 years in prison and it hadn't changed him at all. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "You stay here tonight. This building is secure. Derek doesn't know it exists. Tomorrow, when Derek comes looking for you again, I'll be there instead. We'll have our conversation, and then you'll be able to go home and live your life without looking over your shoulder." Jenna never learned exactly what Marco said to Derek Vaughn. What she did learn was that on Wednesday evening, the night after she'd stayed in Marco's secure building, Derek left New York. Not to Brazil, not to hide, to California, to move in with his mother, according to the information Marco shared. Before he left, Derek withdrew his appeals on the restraining order. He signed paperwork acknowledging that he was never to contact Jenna again, that he understood the consequences of doing so, and that he was voluntarily moving out of state. "What did you say to him?" Jenna asked when Marco told her. "I explained reality," Marco said. "I showed him documentation of every time he'd approached you in the past week. I explained that this violated his parole and could send him back to prison. I also explained that you were under my protection and that any further approaches would be considered a personal insult to me." And he just agreed? People usually agree when they understand the alternatives. Marco's expression was unreadable. Derek is a coward who picks on people weaker than him. When confronted by someone stronger, cowards fold. "Did you threaten him?" "I informed him of consequences. Whether that's a threat depends on your perspective." Jenna didn't push further. She suspected the conversation had been less gentle than Marco was describing. But she also suspected that Derek truly understood now, in a way he'd never understood from police or courts or restraining orders, that Jenna was off limits. And she was right. Derek never contacted her again, never came back to New York, never sent messages or made calls or showed up outside her building. He simply stopped. For the first time in 3 years, Jenna was actually free. 2 years after the night at Romano's restaurant, Jenna stood in an art gallery in Chelsea at the opening of her first professional exhibition. The gallery walls displayed 15 pieces, digital art and graphic design work that she'd created over the past year, personal work, not commercial. Pieces that told stories about survival, about healing, about finding yourself after someone tried to destroy you. The opening was crowded. Patricia from Santoro Properties was there, along with several colleagues. Jenna's therapist had come. Even Tony from Romano's had shown up, proud that his former waitress had become someone whose art was displayed in galleries. And in the back corner, trying to be inconspicuous and failing because he carried himself like someone used to commanding rooms, was Marco Santoro. Jenna made her way through the crowd to him. "You came," she said. "Of course, you invited me. I didn't think you'd actually show up. This isn't exactly your scene." Marco looked around the gallery, at the art, at the well-dressed crowd discussing aesthetics and technique. "No," he agreed. "But you are my scene. Or rather, I care about your success. So here I am." Jenna smiled. "Thank you. For being here and for," she gestured vaguely, "everything. You've thanked me many times. You don't need to keep doing it. I know, but I keep finding new reasons to be grateful. 2 years ago, I was hiding bruises under makeup and living in fear. Now I'm showing my art in a gallery. That doesn't happen without help." "It doesn't happen without talent and hard work," Marco corrected. "I helped with the circumstances. You did the rest." They stood together, looking at the art on the walls. One piece in particular caught Marco's attention, a digital painting of a woman walking away from shadows that had no source, heading toward light that seemed to come from inside her. "That one's about leaving Derek," Jenna said, following his gaze. "Leaving the person I was when I was with him, finding the person I actually am." "It's powerful." Marco studied the piece carefully. "Sophia would have liked it. She was artistic too, painted mostly. She wanted to go to art school, but our father thought it was impractical. I'm sorry she didn't get the chance." "So am I." Marco was quiet for a moment. "But I'm glad you did. That's something at least." An art critic approached to ask Jenna questions about her work. Marco stepped back, letting her have the spotlight. Later, after most of the crowd had left, Jenna found Marco still studying the painting of the woman walking toward internal light. "Can I ask you something?" Jenna said. "Always. Do you ever regret it? The life you chose? The things you've done?" Marco considered the question seriously. "I regret that I had to make certain choices. I don't regret making them, if that makes sense. I built power through methods I'm not proud of because I needed that power to protect people. The methods were sometimes ugly. The purpose wasn't. Do you ever think about doing something different, something legal? My businesses are mostly legal now. Santoro Properties, the construction company, the waste management contracts, all legitimate. I'm not the same person my father and grandfather were." He paused. "But I still operate by different rules than most businessmen. I still use methods that wouldn't survive legal scrutiny, because sometimes the right thing to do isn't the legal thing to do. Like with Derek. The legal system gave him 2 years in prison and released him to stalk you again. I had one conversation with him and he left the state permanently. Which approach actually protected you?" Jenna didn't have an answer to that. Or rather, she had an answer she wasn't entirely comfortable with. "I should go," Marco said. "This is your night. Enjoy it." "Marco," Jenna stopped him. "You saved my life. You know that, right? If you hadn't been at Romano's that night, if you hadn't intervened, Derek would have hurt me again, badly, maybe worse. I did what anyone should do. But most people don't. Most people look away, decide it's not their business. You didn't. I couldn't, not after Sophia. Then I'm grateful for both reasons, that you helped me and that you're keeping Sophia's memory alive by helping people like me." Marco's expression softened slightly. "Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know." After he left, Jenna stood in front of her painting of the woman walking toward light. She thought about Marco carrying Sophia's memory for 20 years, about how he'd turned grief into purpose, loss into protection for others. She thought about Derek in California, finally gone from her life, unable to hurt her anymore. She thought about the life she'd built, the job she loved, the apartment where she felt safe, the art she was creating, the therapy that was slowly healing wounds Derek had carved into her. All because a man at table 7 in Romano's restaurant had noticed bruises under makeup and decided that someone needed to help. 5 years after that night at Romano's, Jenna stood in Marco's office at Santoro Properties with a proposal. She'd been promoted 3 times since starting as a graphic designer. Now she was director of marketing for the entire company, overseeing a team of 12 people, managing campaigns for developments across 3 states. But today she wasn't there to discuss marketing. "I want to start something," she told Marco. "A foundation to help domestic violence survivors rebuild their lives. Not just shelter and immediate protection, job training, career placement, therapy funding, everything needed to actually escape and stay out." Marco leaned back in his chair, listening. "I was lucky," Jenna continued. "I had you. Most women don't. They leave their abusers and then they're homeless or unemployed, or they have to go back because they can't survive alone. I want to change that." "What would you need?" "Initial funding. Probably $500,000 to start. Then ongoing fundraising, partnerships with businesses willing to hire survivors, connections with therapists and lawyers." She paused. "And I want to name it after Sophia, the Sophia Santoro Foundation, if that's okay with you." Something happened to Marco's face. His carefully maintained composure cracked slightly, showing emotion underneath. "She would have loved that," he said quietly. "She would have wanted to help people exactly this way." "So I can do it?" "You can do it, and I'll provide the initial funding, not through Santoro Properties, through my personal accounts. This should be separate from the business." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This is going to be hard work. Foundations are complicated. You'll need board members, legal structure, relationships with social services." "I know, but I've spent 5 years learning business from you. I think I'm ready." Marco smiled. Still a rare occurrence, even after 5 years of working together. "I think you are too." The Sophia Santoro Foundation launched 6 months later. The board included Jenna, Marco, Patricia from Santoro Properties, and 3 other professionals with expertise in nonprofit management and domestic violence services. The foundation's mission was simple: help women escape and rebuild, provide job training, connect with employers, fund therapy, offer transitional housing. Everything Jenna wished had existed when she'd left Derek. Within its first year, the foundation helped 47 women leave abusive situations and find stable employment. Within 3 years, that number was over 200. Jenna ran the foundation while still working part-time for Santoro Properties. It was exhausting, demanding, and the most meaningful work she'd ever done. And Marco was there for all of it. Funding expansion, making introductions to potential partners, attending every gala and fundraiser, standing in the back of rooms and watching Jenna talk about Sophia's legacy and how they were keeping it alive. One evening, after a particularly successful fundraising event, Marco and Jenna sat in his office, sharing a bottle of wine that had been a gift from a major donor. "Sophia would be proud of you," Jenna said. "You've built something real in her memory." "We've built it," Marco corrected. "This was your idea, your vision. I just provided resources." "You provided more than resources. You provided the example. You showed me that power could be used to protect instead of harm. That strength didn't have to be violent." Marco was quiet for a moment. "I have been violent, Jenna. I've done things I'm not proud of. I don't want you to idealize me." "I'm not idealizing you. I'm seeing you clearly. Yes, you've done questionable things. But you've also saved lives, mine included." She met his eyes. "You're complicated. You're not all good. But you're not all bad either. And the work we're doing together, the foundation, that's unambiguously good. That's because of you. You're the good part. Then we balance each other. You're the protection. I'm the healing. Together we're helping people survive and rebuild." Marco smiled, and this time it wasn't rare or surprising. It was natural. "Together," he agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, 2 people who'd found each other because of violence and built something beautiful in spite of it. Jenna thought about the woman she'd been 7 years ago, hiding bruises, afraid to leave, convinced she deserved what Derek did to her. She thought about the woman she was now, strong, successful, helping other women find the courage she'd needed so desperately. And she thought about the man sitting across from her, the Mafia boss with the gentle voice and the fierce protection, who'd seen someone in danger and decided that this time would be different. This time, someone would help. This time the story would have a different ending, and it had.